Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're diving back into Age of Wonders 4 to take a look at the brand new Archon Prophecy DLC. As with all of Age of Wonders 4's best DLC, this one adds a bunch of new tomes to bring significantly different options to any playthrough, regardless of if you play using its new scenarios or factions or not, introducing a large number of new units and buildings and spells to go with them. But there's more to it than just that, with new narrative scenarios and new realm and faction creation options too. So, with no more time to waste on an introduction, and with timestamps down below, let's begin. Realm and Faction Creation. There have been a couple additions when it comes to realm creation, with faction creation introducing a bunch of fresh options as well. Let's start with the lighter topic here, which is realm creation. The Blessed Fields climb trait makes for a nicer world, removing ashlands and making sand, snow, and ice rare, with blessed regions occurring relatively frequently, increasing the stability of any city that annexes one. Then there's the Celestial Grounds Inhabitants trait that simply makes celestial units, Crusader host infestations, and constructed ancient wonders common. The more impactful options come in faction creation. First off, there are 7 new pre-built factions available with Archon Prophecy, and while most of them mix and match the usual set of options that'll be available to you with and without this DLC, some of them come with Pantheon unlocks as part of their faction traits by default, whether you've unlocked them or not. Julia of House Iniok, for example, comes with Druidic Terraformers. Cletus the Artist comes with Talented Collectors, Malil comes with Relentless Crusaders, and Petra Selena comes with Astrological Diviners. When making your faction from scratch, you'll notice a few new options, starting with 2 new forms, Elysian and Ancient. The former starts with Inner Radiance, Defensive Tactics, and Adaptable, while the latter starts with Arcane Focus, Resistant, Defensive Tactics, and Weak Constitution by default, though, of course, you can change these as you wish. In particular, Archon Prophecy adds Griffin and Celestial Griffin mounts to give flying movement and start the ruler off with each mount accordingly. The DLC also brings Chariot mounts to give extra HP, provide immunity to casualties as a result of reducing the number of entities in a unit down to 1, and of course, to put the ruler on a chariot to start. Moving on, there's 1 new culture to choose, with 6 choices of starting affinity within it, each giving 2 points towards said affinity. As an architect culture, you can either be one of Order, Chaos, Astral, Materium, Nature, or Shadow. Regardless of which you choose, the culture grants a higher production income, affinity-based damage for architect culture units, the option to build monuments using the uniquely available Wonderstone resource, and additional benefits from said monuments, including extra damage from Affinity Incarnate, something we'll touch more on in just a little bit. Additional improvements to a monument will also grant bigger stacks of Affinity Incarnate alongside boosts to stability, output, income, and much more. There are 6 units available to architects, each with Affinity Incarnate, bringing some very interesting considerations to the battlefield. We'll go over these units in detail later in the video when I go over all the other units coming with this DLC as well. We'll also go over the Tome of the Architect in detail in the next section. The Architect culture also brings with it a few specific pieces of equipment. Moving on from the Architect culture, next up we have Society traits, introducing 3 different kinds of prophecy-based society traits and interesting quest lines with multiple long-term pathways, the completion of which grant a variety of rewards or otherwise trigger a global effect. Between Visions of Destiny, Visions of Promise, and Visions of Ruin, only one of these 3 can be picked, resulting in different rewards, but all 3 start with a vision that grants you affinity based on the choice you make. I think these are a particularly cool addition to the game in an otherwise unexpected spot, and they introduce a bit of a new dimension of customization to the game as well. Finally, Archon Prophecy introduces the Battle Saint hero class and a ton of new aesthetic options too. But there's a specific part of faction creation that I've conveniently skipped to segue us to the next section. So let's move on to tomes. First things first, let's briefly discuss the Tome of the Architect that you start with should you choose the Architect culture. The tome allows for the construction of monuments to grant stacks of the special Affinity Incarnate trait that comes by default on Architect units. They also increase affinity per your choice, can be upgraded multiple times to get more advanced and powerful benefits, partly influenced by your affinity of choice, and they act as conduits. Apart from these monuments as a special province upgrade, you also get affinity effigies as city structures that increase food, gold, and mana income. Moving on to spells, first up, there's a unit enchantment that grants all non-architect units Affinity Incarnate. This primarily grants additional damage to a unit off the back of monuments you've constructed, but it has additional benefits as it synergizes with other units' active abilities. Then there is Conjure Elemental, which allows you to summon a Tier 1 Lesser Spirit. It reflects your Empire's currently dominant affinity, and it lasts for 3 turns unless it gets killed before that time is up, of course. Finally, Resilient Incarnation buffs friendly units in a 1 hex radius for a turn with increased defense and resistance, further boosted per stack of Affinity Incarnate. You can see that Affinity Incarnate gets mentioned a lot with this new DLC. But moving on to the tomes that you pick during gameplay. At Tier 2, the Tome of Virtue becomes available. Apart from giving +2 Order Affinity, it provides a new unit, a few spells, including one for summoning a unit, and a city structure. Virtuous Spirit is a minor race transformation that gives the target race +2 to spirit resistance and increases their defense and resistance when HP drops below 60%, also ignoring some of its casualties that would otherwise impact damage output. This can make a significant difference in particularly close battles. Heroic Stand, meanwhile, is a buff that allows a target unit to ignore those same casualty penalties for a single turn, but to a greater degree, and it also removes the target unit's negative status effects and grants them Steadfast for a turn that could keep them alive in a dangerous situation. The Paladin unit unlocked through this tome is a Tier 3 shield unit, and apart from its melee strike, it can smite an enemy unit to damage it and then promptly enter defense mode, with Lay on Hands allowing it to significantly heal and provide temporary status protection to nearby units with a 3-turn cooldown between uses. Summon Vigil is a summon spell that brings about, you guessed it, a Vigil. This is a powerful battle mage unit with blinding radiant bolts and a longer range purifying blast that causes a significant amount of damage and removes the positive status effects of a targeted unit, while hitting adjacent units with half damage and removing 2 of their positive status effects. The Vigil is immune to control loss, can damage fortifications, and not only gives double morale bonuses when killing enemies, but also causes extra spirit damage and additional damage to condemned units through Zeal. The spell itself requires a wizard tower at level 2 to be used, but even with that, this feels very powerful. Finally, the House of Charity city structure takes a small bit of gold to double the city's food and production output. Next up, at Tier 3 we have the Tome of Prophecies, split between Order and Astral Affinity, and giving access to the Temple of the Prophet's special province improvement that generates mana and counts as a conduit while generating knowledge per adjacent conduit as well. The Oracle is the one unit from this tome, bringing a very high HP support unit with a hefty Mystic Blast that can make it easier for allies to hit a target apart from doing its own damage. If that's not enough, Striking Portent gives all friendly units in a 1 hex radius True Strike for a turn and 2 stacks of Fortune for 3, so while True Strike guarantees a hit, Fortune increases critical chance by 10% per stack, and as you can imagine, landing that on a bunch of units can absolutely turn the tide of battle or set the tone from the start of one. If that's not enough, Healing Portent targets units in a 1 hex radius to heal them with 40 temporary hit points and give them precognition. Scrying Eye, meanwhile, makes the Oracle immune to flanking and becoming distracted, while True Sight allows it to see invisible or camouflaged units. Next up, we have Battle Divination, a buff that, over the course of multiple turns, gives friendly units extra evasion for the turn, precognition for the turn, and extra damage for the turn. Feels like something that has a very specific use case, to be honest. Fated Projectiles, meanwhile, is a unit enchantment that impacts ranged and battle mage units specifically, increasing their critical hit chance and reducing their upkeep cost by 10% with the help of Faithful. Foresee Downfall, meanwhile, is a siege project that should make a fairly major difference to a tough siege battle, giving all friendly units precognition and plus 10% critical hit chance for the duration of the entire combat, while also giving enemy units a 10% chance to fumble. 10% is no small number when it comes to crits and fumbles, so this is quite powerful. Finally, Prescient Circlets is a unit enchantment for Polearm, Shock, Skirmisher, Shield, and Fighter units, giving them precognition when they enter defense mode. There are 2 tomes at Tier 4. First up, the Tome of the Archon, coming in with +2 to Order Affinity, and Archon Gates as a special province improvement that increases city stability, acts as a deployment location, functions as a teleporter, and allows for the drafting of powerful, mythic, Titan units. These come in with a classic heavy charge strike, as well as a sunburst that damages enemy units in a 1 hex radius, hits them with 2 stacks of burning for 3 turns, and potentially blinds them as well. Mend the Weak, meanwhile, helps heal friendly units, and the Rite of Atonement allows you to turn enemy units killed by the Titan into lesser light spirits under your control. They can actually be kept around post-battle as well with some mana cost, which is pretty interesting. Otherwise, the Titan has control loss immunity, acts as a demolisher, is an inspiring killer, and Siegebreaker with Unstoppable Juggernaut, coming in with Zeal to help do extra damage. The Titan isn't the only cool unit coming from here though. Summon Astra requires an Apex level Wizard Tower, but allows you to summon a flying Astra mythic unit with a Radiant Strike in melee that inflicts Condemned and Burning onto its targets, and Divine Sundering, which allows hits for immense damage and inflicts Condemned as well as Sundered Defense and Sundered Resistance for 3 whole turns. Beyond that, Angelic Grace gives all friendly units in a 2 hex radius 20 temporary hit points to heal, as well as a stack of Grace to help keep them alive while trading blows, and all that with just a 2-turn cooldown. Archonic Leadership helps buff other celestial units, and the Astra is otherwise immune to control loss, has the Demolisher trait, is immune to routing thanks to the Fearless trait, and comes in with a Holy Aura that both provides resistance for adjacent friendly units and causes spirit damage to adjacent enemy units at the end of the turn. Beyond that, the Astra is an inspiring killer with extra damage output from Zeal. But wait, there's more. Celestial Guardians will allow you to target an army and, for a whole turn on the world map, conjure 2 tier 3 Archon units at the start of combat. This is a powerful surprise for an unsuspecting enemy, and it can make even a tame army into a surgical strike. But wait, there's more. A little different this one, but Ascended Rebirth allows you to target a dead, non-hero, non-celestial unit to revive them as a vigil until the end of combat, while also granting all friendly units within a 2 hex radius 20 temporary hit points. Basically, if things are looking rough, drop one of these and turn the tide, especially with the help of the aforementioned vigil. The last 2 unlocks here don't bring more units to bear. First up, Pure Soul is a minor race transformation that grants the target race a few benefits. For one, at the start of each combat turn, they'll remove 1 negative status effect, but on top of that, if there's a positive counter to that negative effect, that will apply instead. And finally, Holy Aura is a unit enchantment for shield, shock, polearm, fighter, and skirmisher units, granting Holy Auras that provide status resistance to adjacent friendly units and apply spirit damage to adjacent enemy units at the end of a turn. Finally, the Tome of the Revenant comes with Order and Shadow Affinity, and gives access to the Necropolis Special Province improvement that acts as a research post and helps generate souls itself with a boost per adjacent research post as well. These are used to draft undead units, and the building itself allows for the drafting of skeletons, corrupt souls, and undead titans. Undead titans come in as a mythic unit with heavy charge strike to cause more damage per hex moved and cancel the target unit's defense mode while removing a retaliation attack, and ignoring charge resistance to boot. If the target's morale is low or worse, Cruel causes extra damage, and Lifesteal heals the undead titan for 10 temporary hit points. Dreadburst, meanwhile, hits enemy units in a 1 hex radius with damage, 2 stacks of Remorse for 3 turns, and a chance of being hit by Decaying for 3 turns as well to cause damage over time. It also helps regenerate the undead titan's health just a little bit. Conjure Skeleton allows you to bring a skeleton in for 3 turns. Apart from that, the undead titan comes in with control loss immunity, Demolisher, Heartless, Siegebreaker, and Unstoppable Juggernaut. The terrifying aura on this thing causes adjacent enemy units to lose morale at the end of the turn as long as they don't themselves have terrifying auras. And finally, Rite of Undeath means that when the undead titan kills an enemy, the killed enemy turns into a skeleton under its control. Summon Fallen Angel, meanwhile, allows you to summon the flying Fallen Angel mythic unit, bringing its ranged corrupt bolts that cause a lot of damage while inflicting Weakened and Remorse for 3 turns each, and healing 5 hit points for itself per hit. Ray of Corruption, meanwhile, goes forth in a 3 hex wide line for 4 hexes in length, hitting everyone with a ton of damage alongside 2 stacks of Weakened and 3 stacks of Remorse for 3 turns each, stealing 10 hit points instead of just 5, and all that with just a 2-turn cooldown. Both of these attacks are great for getting an enemy to deal less damage, or potentially just get them to flee from combat. But why make your enemies flee when you can use Dark Temptation to take control of them instead? With a base 120% chance of success on non-hero units, the chance of resistance is low unless the target is souped up, and even then, if resisted, the unit takes a significant amount of damage and gets hit by 2 stacks of status vulnerability and 3 stacks of remorse for 3 turns as well. Armor of Despair aids defense and resistance against attackers with lower morale. Soul Maintenance causes a heightened soul upkeep cost to reduce gold and mana upkeep costs, and otherwise, the unit is a heartless, fearless demolisher with control loss immunity. Finally, Dark Rites means that the death of an enemy unit heals the fallen angel for 10 temporary hit points and grants it a stack of Strengthened, up to 5 stacks. Moving on, Revenant Whispers allows you to target an enemy army on the world map to hit them with a turn of 2 stacks of Demoralized, and if that army is attacked within this turn, 3 skeletons are conjured to support you in battle, coming in with Unholy Champion, granting them a 50% increase to damage, reviving them with half health at least once in the battle, 2 turns after they die, and also increasing their defense and resistance against enemies with below neutral morale. Unholy Champion is itself a spell that can be cast on a friendly unit while giving enemy units in a 2-hex radius a reduction in morale. Undead Resentment is a unit enchantment targeting undead units and granting them spirit and fire resistance, as well as the ability to cause increased morale penalties to units within 3 hexes when killing an enemy, thanks to Vicious Killer. Finally, Chamber of the Right is a city structure that ensures undead units drafted in the city gain natural regeneration to keep them alive longer in combat and on the world map. These are all hefty tomes, and honestly, I find them to be the most exciting part of any DLC, but we're not done here just yet. Units. I won't repeat the units we already discussed in the previous section here, so if you're curious about units that come specifically from one of the 4 tomes you can pick while playing through a game, make sure you give the previous section a watch. With that said, let's start this section by focusing on the Architect Culture's 6 units. The Surveyor is able to move quickly to scout effectively with the added benefit of Farsight, and it's able to survey provinces with magic materials to gain Wonderstones, making this lowly Tier 1 unit relatively valuable. In battle, they hurl magic bolts at range. The Cultivator also fires magic from range and is otherwise able to use Cultivate Affinity to boost the target unit's Affinity Incarnate level, dispel negative status effects, and gain and grant temporary HP with the targeted unit. Their defense mode provides warding, like other support units, and so they can be quite helpful in keeping your units alive. The Earthbreaker is a shock unit, gaining extra damage to its melee attack per hex traveled, up to 3 hexes, cancelling an enemy unit's defense mode and removing a retaliation attack from them too. Fairly familiar, but this attack also targets a 1-hex cone for a fraction of the total damage output, transitioning the unit into defense mode after the attack is done. Apart from the usual benefits from Affinity Incarnate, the Earthbreaker also has Incarnate Fortitude to gain extra hit points from each stack of Affinity Incarnate. The Guardian Shield unit has a regular melee attack and the Shield Wall defense mode that shield units get by default. It also has First Strike and Shield Defense, which are familiar unit traits too, but Incarnate Retaliation makes retaliations stronger, while Incarnate Disruption helps not just the Guardian cause more damage, but any allied units too, regardless of culture, as it reduces adjacent enemy units' damage type resistance for each stack of Affinity Incarnate on the Guardian in question. The Shademaker is a ranged unit with a bow shot that does extra damage against large targets, as well as an Incarnate shot that has a significant chance of inflicting a stack of weakened per Affinity Incarnate stack on the Shademaker taking the shot, reducing the targeted unit's damage output. Finally, the Architect is another support unit, this one at Tier 3, with ranged Magic Blast, the Warding Defense mode, and 2 active abilities. Conjure Order Tesseract summons an Affinity Tesseract onto a location with a damage type to match its caster, launching ranged attacks and coming in with a decent amount of HP, otherwise able to last for 3 turns. Incarnate Restoration, meanwhile, hits the target friendly unit with 20 temporary hit points of healing, with an extra 10 hit points and stack of regeneration for each stack of Affinity Incarnate on the target unit. Moving on from the Architect units, we've got 2 new Wildlife units that double up as mounts, the Griffin and the Celestial Griffin. The former is a low-maintenance shock unit with flyby melee charge to cause extra damage per hex traveled, cancel the target's defense mode, remove retaliation attacks, and potentially inflict bleeding for 3 turns. The Celestial Griffin is a low-maintenance flying skirmisher unit instead, coming with a strong resistance sundering melee strike, retreating 4 hexes after landing a 3rd hit, making this a highly mobile skirmisher. Fling Pinion, meanwhile, provides a ranged option that also sunders resistance for 3 turns. Zeal means all attacks deal additional spirit damage, with even more damage against condemned units, and there are quite a few traits that help avoid slowing terrain, opportunity attacks, and control loss, with Inspiring Killer helping boost morale when killing enemies. It's a hefty number of new units added here, and as always, the designs are super cool and inspired, with some really cool abilities and attacks coming with them. There's a lot of fun to be had with these new battlefield options, that's for sure, but let's step away from the battlefield and discuss narrative campaigns. Before I start, don't worry, I won't discuss or describe any spoilers here, and will keep everything light on details. When Age of Wonders 4 launched, there were quite a few folks that were disappointed that it didn't come with any kind of narrative experience. Even the sci-fi themed Age of Wonders Planetfall had a few of those, and while I didn't personally feel too strongly about it, I could see why some people did. And it's clear that the devs were paying attention, of course, and that continues to be the case with this DLC, as they add 2 new narrative scenarios that you can play through to experience a new combined storyline. You need to play the first one, Rings of Emnora, before you'll have the second one, Cliffs of Sordun, unlocked. Both of these feature quite unique map designs, as well as unique quests and choices to go with them, and proper intro and outro sequences. I can't call them cinematics, but they are nicely written and come fully voiced. The story is interesting, taking you to other realms with your Godir and introducing you to the titular Archons and the titular prophecy of theirs, but it's worth noting that you cannot play these scenarios as the Elysian or Ancient factions that come pre-built with the DLC, though you can play as Cletus the Artist, who also comes with this DLC, as well as any other pre-built or custom faction. Cletus is a Spellblade class Wizard King that leads a faction of dwarfs with the Architect culture, the Wonder Architect's trait, as well as the Talented Collector's trait that's only available through a Pantheon unlock otherwise. Apart from that, these guys start with the base game's Tome of Rock and everything that comes with. Both campaigns are fun experiences overall, with some clever ways to manipulate the game's core functionality to introduce new ideas, but I'm also the kind of person that really just enjoys the procedurally generated experience, so I consider them to be the cherry on top of the DLC, though I know some of y'all will be very happy to see new narrative playthroughs being available as a result of Archon Prophecy. But there it is, folks. The Archon Prophecy DLC brings with it quite a lot, with a handful of buildings, new equipment, new ancient wonders, and a handful of other minor additions to add even more meat to the purchase beyond what I talked about for these last 20 or so minutes. I hope this video helped highlight if the DLC is for you or not, and if it did, consider leaving a like down below. The additional tomes alone carry a lot of weight in my humble opinion, but there's so much more besides, and if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll answer what I can. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.